Hello, everybody. This is Catholic Dad, episode number 278. Some people always want war. I don't know if you saw what was going on in the news this past week, but we've been stuck in war in the United States of America probably since World War II, I would say. There's been these little police actions and warmongering throughout the world for quite some time, and it's only getting worse, by the way, with regards to the United States of America. We're stuck in so many stinking endless wars, it's ridiculous. Well, so Donald Trump got elected. Why? Because he said we have to get out of these dumb wars. And I remember when he caught my heartstrings, he said something to the effect of, we've spent $7 trillion overseas fighting wars. Could you imagine what our nation would look like if we took the same trillion and spent it on our own people in our own country? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? And the problem is when you're stuck in endless war, it's exquisitely expensive. And Donald Trump, in the last State of the Union address, he said, no great nation can survive if it fights endless wars. They just don't do it. It's the great nations that survive are the ones that escape endless war. That's the way it works. And once you start fighting endless war, that's kind of the end of your great nation. It's the end of your republic. It's the end of your way of life, because then you're suddenly, all the labors of your people are feeding this destructive process that doesn't create anything good. Well, anyway, so we've been sucking all these endless wars in Syria and Afghanistan and Yemen and Saudi Arabia and you name it. We just keep fighting these dang wars. And Trump decided to unilaterally pull out the troops from Syria last week, and the entire Washington establishment went apoplectic, both the left and the right. Suddenly the Democrats, in their last Democratic debate, they all sounded like a bunch of warmongers. Like the Democratic Party is becoming the party of war all of a sudden, and the Republican Party, because of Donald Trump, is becoming the party of peace and get us out of war. That's the way it's traditionally been in this nation, by the way. But nonetheless, there are some people that always want war, no matter what. The excuse they used for us getting out of Syria was that what about the Kurds? The Kurds have been our friends for so many years, and if we abandon our friends, then we have nobody we can rely upon in the future. Like, nobody will be able to trust the United States of America. Well, why were the Kurds our friends? You got to really wonder about that. They were our friends because we've been feeding them a disgusting amount of money and weapons to go fight the war bidding that we want them to do. If we didn't go pay off all the cronies in Kurdistan or whatever it is, in northern Iraq, they probably would have never been doing any fighting for us. We essentially had to bribe them to be our friends. Think about that for a second. So are they really our friends anyway? What if somebody came along and paid them more money to fight us? You think they would still be our friends? Doubtful. Seriously, why are the Kurds our friends? They're 6,000 miles away, and we have no vested interest in the Middle East other than creating war. Of course they're going to fight wars that we pay them to fight. So if that's not a good enough reason, like literally, if you can't pull out of endless war because, well, you got to care for the Kurds, is there ever a good reason ever to pull out of endless war? And the answer to the war party people, the people that always want war and like war, is there are no good reason to ever to pull out of war. But the problem is great nations become bankrupted by this. And great nations will become bankrupted, and you will have to pull out of the war eventually, because the money will dry up and you'll no longer be able to afford the empire, and you will bankrupt a nation. The problem is the great benefactors of war, the arms dealers and the bankers and everything else, the people that actually, the profiteers of war, which there are a lot of them, by the way. Once you pull out of war and your country pulls back, what they're going to do is they're going to shift their loyalties to another country that's able to do their bidding, take on a lot of debt, buy a lot of firearms, and give them away, and foreign aid and all the other stuff. And so these people are not nationalists at all. They're not loyalists to any nation. They're loyalists to the funnel of money. They're loyalists to the fighting of war. If I could just point out some names in America that have been that way, Dick Cheney being one of them comes to mind, Liz Cheney being another one, Donald Rumsfeld being another one, of all the Bushes being another one, the Mitt Romneys of the group, the John McCains of the group, the Warhawks, the neoconservatives, you name it. I mean, think about Donald Rumsfeld, by the way. He was a congressman in the United States of America. He gets out of the Congress, and he goes on to be a CEO of a biomedical firm. Like, he has any training for that? And there's videos of him shaking hands with Saddam Hussein in the mid-'80s. And he literally sold Saddam Hussein weapons of mass destruction, biomedical or biochemical warfare agents, back in the mid-'80s. And he's shaking hands with Saddam Hussein. And Donald Rumsfeld personally made approximately a $11 million fortune by doing that. Then he goes back into goes into the State Department. Then he launches a war on Saddam Hussein to take away the weapons of mass destruction, which Donald Rumsfeld was the one that was responsible for selling him. Think about that for a second, people. That's unbelievable. Think about it. This as well. George W. Bush had Dick Cheney as his vice president, and Dick Cheney, he was the CEO of Halliburton, which is a military-industrial complex corporation, which buy and sells goods for the war machine. And he was exquisitely wealthy, exquisitely rich. Can anybody in this nation believe that we elevated war profiteers to such a high level in our government? The problem is the war profiteers are the ones that always come from government, and then they go back to government, and they go back to corporations and back to government because they're always profiteering based upon the public treasury. That's what war is. War is an extraction of public treasury dollars to a sordid affair to a couple people that are war profiteers. So if abandoning the Kurds is a good enough reason to stay in the Middle East, then we will never, ever, ever leave the Middle East until we're completely bankrupt. And then all those people that wanted to keep us in the Middle East will leave the national loyalty of America behind, and they'll go to another nation that has more money to spend, more debt to take on, and more arms to sell. Well, anyway, some people always want war. War's not good. We should always try to make peace with people if we can. It's called diplomacy. Well, anyway, this is Catholic Dad making you think about it. Please like or subscribe, get the Mass, and pray the Daily Rosary. God bless you all.